A 5, a 6, a 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3. Ducky joint. Welcome to the Ducky Joint Podcast, everybody. My name is Scott McRae.
Brandon Brown.
Scott Teshy.
Very special guest today, Layla.
I'm their very special guest today.
Special.
Yeah.
So why don't you introduce yourself to the folks at home, Layla?
Wait, what do you want to know about me?
I don't know. What are you willing to bring forth?
Revelations, my dear.
Yeah, whatever you're willing to secrete to the viewers.
Well, I don't know about secretions, but I did wreck your toilet this morning. Shout out to Scott McRae's toilet.
Poor guy.
Put up a fight.
A
Been through some battles.
bastion.
Bastion. So yeah, why don't you, I mean that's a pretty good indicator, but why don't you just introduce yourself to the people at home?
Yeah, okay. I'm from Albuquerque, go to school at UCSC, plant science, maybe gonna grow some weed. We'll see.
That's cool. That's awesome. It's very dope.
Most definitely.
So yeah, what's going on this week, everybody?
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Tell
Pretty
us how
much,
you got here, yeah.
All of California is on fire, pretty much. Santa Cruz is on fire. Well, not a town, but like all those other tiny towns, they got on fire. A lot of California got burned, and everybody was like, "Oh shit, the air quality sucks. I'm just gonna go home." But then they all live in the Bay in Los Angeles, so they go home. The air quality's even worse. So, yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, when we were driving back from Albuquerque, the whole way up, all we saw was like smoke and haze.
I mean, we saw the fires in Santa Fe.
Yeah, that's right. We saw like a little outline of the fires when we were coming down, but it's crazy.
Because they were all throughout like California.
It's
like,
California, Nevada, and New Mexico, yeah. All the Southwest is on fire right now.
In Santa Cruz, at least, there was like ash raining from the sky so much that my like car got caked.
Your car looks wild.
It's still caked. I could not get that shit off. I like tried. But you know those things you get at like the gas station?
Squeegees? Yeah.
Squeegees?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, with the squeegee, and it did not do nothing.
That's funny. You brought a little bit of Santa Cruz with you.
Yeah, I did. Actually, no, I brought a little bit of some of the houses in Santa Cruz with me.
Oh, God. Oh.
Now that I think about it.
It's morbid as hell.
But it's just a little bit of home wherever you go, you know?
You okay with it?
Yeah.
What's wrong?
Nothing.
Okay.
Fuck.
Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah,
How have you enjoyed Portland?
Thank you, yeah. Well, you've been such a great host. Shout out to Scott and his lovely apartment and his lovely housemates that I've seen
Intermittently.
that I've heard
Yeah,
more often.
Heard more than seen, yes. They are felt, if not seen, yeah.
Big shout out to the mystery housemate that I have not seen.
3 for 4, baby.
I know you're here.
I know you're here. I'm fucking sick.
But yeah, outside of that, any impressions of Portland? Anything sticking out to you?
Well, everybody, you know, who's not in Portland is like, Portland is on fire right now. And I'm like in California being like,
Insensitive.
too soon, guys, too soon. Honestly, like it's just boarded, like the bank's boarded up, the Church of Scientology is boarded up, which like, good move on their part, and and the police station is boarded up. There's like a solid 2-3 blocks, everything's boarded up. Other than that, it's just Portland. That's it. I'm very disappointed. I was expecting to step into the city and there would be riots in the streets. My car window would be smashed in. My camping stove would be taken and used to light a fire for the police station. You know, I was expecting a lot more fanfare, and there's just like.
Yeah, it's almost like the media has sort of contorted and distorted the actual image of what is going on here.
Yeah,
No, that doesn't happen.
No.
First of all, that doesn't happen. Propaganda doesn't happen.
Are you telling me that not every single one of those people down there is a Biden supporter? That's just crazy.
Well, I mean, okay. If they're black, then they're a Biden.
Then they are.
Then they are.
Guaranteed. Because otherwise they aren't, you know.
Right.
Excuse me, they ain't.
They.
Because if you're not, you ain't.
Yeah,
You know?
if you're not, you ain't. if you is, you is. You know what I mean?
You know,
So,
it's got its
It's
flair.
as simple as that.
Yesterday Biden,
Oh, awesome.
I read he put it on an address regarding the shooting in Portland.
Shit, somebody got shot in Portland.
Yeah, during
One of the right-wing guys.
That's funny. I was gonna try to segue into that, but
Yeah.
into the Biden shit first.
We'll probably.
It's all part and parcel, yeah.
That's the same shit.
Basically, he said, he was like, in a very smooth tone, it was like, I condemn the violence in Portland. I condemn violence of any kind from the left or the right. Which I thought was interesting already, implying political violence, because that's, like, not dangerous at all, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say why
Political-based violence.
Implying that any violence, if you're not on the left or the right, is okay.
Is just violence and different? Yeah, okay, anyway. But,
So weird.
he said, and then immediately after he says that, I was like, all right, you're off to a decent start. And he goes, unlike Trump, who wants you to, and I was like, okay, so we're back to the attacking. Cool. When someone got shot, so clearly you care. And he was like, my thoughts and prayers are with the family of the victim and stuff like that. And like, violence of any kind is not okay. And this was not okay and everything like that. And I was kind of thinking about it and I was like, I mean, if you show up with guns to a place where really no one was seeing that many guns, if any at all in some places, as a result of somebody else getting shot the previous day in a different city in the city or sort of stepping up.
You're talking about Albuquerque?
No, I'm talking about Kenosha.
So there's two now.
The 17-year-old
Yeah.
that like shot a bunch of people at the protest.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you have to expect some sort of violence. Like, and I'm not saying that's on them or anything like that, but like, as far as condoning it, yeah, I don't condone it or anything like this, but this is, like, people saw this coming. Like, as soon as the shooting in Kenosha happened, and really in examples before, like you said, there was people in Alfred who got shot, a bartender
Was it
got shot.
Stephen Baca?
Yeah.
Joseph Baca.
Oh, right. I forgot about
Baca. What the fuck his first name was?
But different also because it wasn't like, I don't think it was like a right-wing person.
He was though.
I was?
Yeah.
Oh.
And he actually ran for city council.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was part of that whole, like, well, I guess not proven to be a part of it, but allegedly part of that whole militia group that was chilling at the border and telling people that they couldn't come in the country with guns. And
His outfit was cool enough that I was like, okay, he's probably, part of their like little militia.
He did look like he was a part. Like
Did he have like a camo suit?
Yeah. It was like your stereotypical like militia outfit. Like it was like your cool guys by the border outfit.
Yeah.
Cool guys by the border.
The fit was not fresh though.
But yeah, it was a really interesting statement from Biden. Just it was muddled, he wasn't accepting of the violence, but then also attacking Trump at the same time. When I'm pretty sure Trump didn't say anything about either shooting being okay, as far as I'm concerned.
It's also the thing with Trump is like why am I even gonna look for Trump's input on that event? Like he's I've never once like been like.
That's one of the crazy things to me is that people have obviously already not accepted Trump as their president.
Not my president.
But then they still seek out his view on things,
and
they choose to get upset when it's like, we knew, we already are against this nigga because of his views that are like this, and then when he does it again, niggas are like, what the fuck?
How did this happen?
Why is
I
he
guess it's a
doing
good
that?
point. To be like almost like sanely against Trump is to be like passively like to be an active participant in fighting someone who is so stupid that they don't even understand the opposition.
It's like this. It's like this.
It's not,
like you know somebody in high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know they're not like the worst person, but they're not the best person either, right? And then like you look them up years later, and you're like, damn, I wonder what like this fucker is doing right here. And I don't want to name nobody from my high school. I already see the gears turning, but you're like, look them up on Facebook, you know, see what they're doing nowadays, and you see them just posting the trashiest shit, and you're like, this is terrible. What a shameful person. Scroll. Oh, I really hate what they've turned out to be.
Alright, I see that.
That's really funny.
However, are you then a week later gonna go back to that person's profile and then scroll,
How invested are you?
and then the next week after that, and then the next week after that for 4 years?
Whatever I do.
Are you gonna continue to do that for 4 years?
So if anybody's doing that, that's the level of obsession that you've got right now.
Right, you hate this nigga, but you will not stop entertaining the shit that he has to say.
I think there's two sides to it. Like, I know we may have discussed this before, but Americans, or at least maybe not Americans, but there is a group, and I have to do some things to narrow it down.
There is a group.
Or I feel like it's a cultural thing, at least it's come around recently, to desire feeling shitty.
Yes. May invert it into pleasure.
Exactly. Yeah, masochism basically.
Yeah.
But weirdly. Anyway, with world social issues.
No, with morality.
Morality. Things they use just to wallow their.
I was writing about that this morning when we were talking about toxic positivity a lot lately. We've been talking about like toxic morality, how kind of toxic our morality is nowadays. That like it enters every sphere of our lives and like takes over and kind of like fucks with us, makes us anxious. And
well, I think that toxic positivity has led to a lot of people having to deal with like real emotions and shit like that and actual turmoil in their lives a lot later than they have previous. Like, and we always said like, oh, your lives were fucked up in the beginning because your parents did this and this and this, and well, although that's true and they couldn't face their emotions in the same way, it's kind of like they still faced it one way or another. The turmoil in general, they may not have handled it as well a generation before us, but yeah, I feel like with the whole, this generation of or not this generation, but the last generation of parents who was like, oh, everything's okay, like it's not your fault, like it's gonna be okay, participation, all that, how everyone talks about that kind of stuff. I feel like that led to people, those kids growing up thinking like, yeah, that everything was gonna be okay, and that toxic positivity just like was ingrained in them, and then as soon as they start to face problems, and some of them never face problems, you know what I mean? Some of them will never face actual problems. But some of them go out, they leave for the first time, and they face so many different things that they never experienced.
Opposition.
Exactly, without their parents or whatever, and it's like then they have to learn to deal with all that stuff. And the whole notion of toxic positivity, what they've grown up knowing, is like shattered.
It's a really interesting idea. And we'll be right back. And we are back.
Back end. Better or worse than ever, it's up for discretion.
I'm about to say it.
It's up to our discretion. It's up for discretion.
For discussion.
For discussion. To our decapitations.
We were on
Leonardo Decapitation.
Leonardo Decapitation.
That's a good band name.
No, it's not.
So about toxic positivity.
Girth Brooks?
Toxic positivity, that's what we are, yeah.
Just like thinking something's a good band name, but when you pitch it to your band.
Girth Brooks. I legitimately pitched Girth Brooks, and everyone was like, that is the most ass band name. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you get for pushing that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the toxic positivity thing you were talking about with like kids growing up in pretty much our generation, and having like the participation award shit, and like whenever they run into trouble, it's like the most for them. It's way overblown. I feel like comedians have talked about that for a while because I remember specifically Tom Segura and one of his specials talking about that shit, and yeah, that's been a thing, and like people have attacked people for saying shit like that, for saying like the participation award era was like not beneficial in the way people thought it was. When it makes sense, you know what I mean? Like
sense.
we were primed for competition, you know what I mean? And then we essentially tried to erase that from ourselves while still not erasing that, while still having that at the epitome of success,
right?
Pretty much, like so, like you still have to compete.
Like society standards still followed a very like intense competition,
right?
Like system,
right?
And then the individual was now being taught that things will work out
throughout all of their development.
Exactly, yeah.
And then
it's
get to
no fault of their own. Like, I don't know why kids or that generation gets mad when people say it, because it's not like, it's just something that happened.
It was the parents too, though, is the thing. Like the parents who went through the
not getting to deal with their emotions at all with their parents.
They're like, oh well, this will be better for them.
Exactly.
It's the overcorrection.
It's exactly. It's that from one end of the spectrum to the other. And like you were saying, like people get mad at, like, I feel like especially kids from this generation, and I think we were part of that generation.
No, we're not.
It's like, so it existed, and it's something that you just have to learn to deal with. But to that same point of kind of notions being shattered for that generation, I feel like along with that, just like with everything that's going on, with how much is being pushed up to the surface about social matters and just how our country is run and the history of our country and like how much shit there actually is, that's like a whole new thing for this generation growing up to deal with, because it's the first generation that's really dealing with it, like really dealing with it, and I feel like that's having a toll on them as well, like the same thing. So it's like they're dealing with these shattering ideas, like these notions are being broken apart, and then I think because we're young and we're naive and we're rambunctious, a lot of people turn to these radical notions, which is something that I've heard a lot from younger kids, our age and younger, that like, oh, our government's so fucked up, we should turn to communism, or we should turn to anarchy, or we should turn to socialism even, and it's like, those have all been proven to not work, and like the reason, debatable.
Yeah, I mean Sweden works. We can't deny it. We can't Norway. We can't, because they don't have a race problem. I mean they don't have
a race problem. They also don't have a population like ours in any.
Absolutely not. They're uncontrollable. I mean.
They're also anyway, but like, so the way our country is set up has to exist the way it is, as a democracy, as a mix between capitalism and socialism.
Right.
Sort of like that, and it just has to be repaired.
There's the intersection of ideas.
Exactly. It just has to be created in the way that we want. But like, I feel like we were talking about, like, it's a dangerous idea to be pushing complete eradication of a system, of a structure in place, because no structure, the same as getting rid of police. When people were saying that at the beginning, get rid of all police, it's like people quickly were like, I don't know if that's a good idea.
Well, because no one recognizes what the cost and toll of a struggle like that would be. Like people aren't, and going back to your thing about the not being ready to deal with opposition, that's why there hasn't been a violent opposition, I think, and because I don't think our generation, quite frankly, would be able to handle a violent opposition in any way, shape, or form. I mean, even though it would probably be necessitated by a historical force and by the movement of history, we would not be able to take it.
Right.
It would not be a thing for us. It would immediately be like this vindictive, like, oh, well, we were hurt. Of course we were hurt. Of course, this force is scared of us. Like, I mean, if they're really going to hurt you, then they're scared of you. You push their hand to the point where they need to use physical force. So I think it's it's almost to a detriment that our generation isn't more like a pragmatic about that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like. Sorry. Go ahead.
I feel like we're pretty desensitized to violence, honestly. Like what used to be like 1 in a million chance, like, oh, never gonna happen. Like we expect that shit every year now. Like a 9/11 was happening like every week. I don't know if that's still going on because I'm so desensitized to coronavirus that I'm like
not even paying attention to
9/11 every week. Like that means nothing to me, and that's just how it is. you know?
And then even beyond that, I feel like with our generation, even though we're so like sensitive to opposition and shit like that, like she said, we're so desensitized to violence that I feel like our generation would think that we're prepared for some shit like that and go into it head first and then not be.
That's interesting because I don't feel like we ever learned like the philosophical meaning of violence. I feel like it's become desensitized, so it's lost its meaning. Like violence does mean something when it's employed. It has a very strong like value, and like we recognize that value. And I think for a long time we did. I think like we used to be shocked by things. You know, I think we're less shocked by things now. I think that's almost like that's when violence is almost like becomes this disturbing thing that it's like it's not a tool for us anymore. I guess it's kind of a weird thing.
Well, I was talking with someone about this yesterday, that violence could just be chalked up to biology, a need for territory or for anything really, that people biologically fight over, and it's just ingrained, and people have lost the idea of that behind it. But I mean, also there are now capitalistic reasons for violence and like personal
biology
reasons
and
for
stuff.
violence. So I do agree with you on the philosophical sense as well. I think that actually, or another way it could go about is that this generation is so opposed to violence that we'll do anything in our power to avoid a huge conflict, a violent conflict at least, not necessarily a conflict in general, but a violent conflict. Because it's almost as if there has been, or at least close to a violent response to a lot of these things that are outbreaking, because you have these alt-right people coming through with fully armed up, and we had a violent response from the police, and we had a violent response from the feds, and like those are the violent responses that we were not prepared for. Like as soon as that happened, people were kind of like you said, freaking out. They were like, oh, I don't know what to do. There's violence. Like response, and then even
we talked about this, how suddenly people were like, we live in a police state, and it's like, now this is hitting you. Like,
yeah, exactly. But even that. Actually, I'm not sure if we've managed to get around it, but I mean, things are moving, things are progressing one way or another, slowly up and down. But I don't know. I'm interested to see how it happens. If truly if we're talking like worst case scenario, like revolution, I don't think
which would be worst case scenario for our generation because we're not smart enough to helm that in any way.
I mean, maybe. I think I don't know. I think there's enough crazy kids out there to do a revolution.
And honestly,
I think maybe. So it's a personal bias.
I definitely have to let some like personal bias in here a little bit. So like, I dated someone who was older than me when I lived in Nashville, and they had a lot of friends who were older than I was, and who were millennials for all intents and purposes. And all the shit people say about millennials that they passed on to us is 100%. All their bullshit about like them never growing up, about them staying the exact same, they like deny it back and forth all day, but it's like, there's almost this like refusal to admit yourself to that you live in capitalism. That is a huge part. Like, capitalism is a made-up thing. Money is a made-up thing.
Right.
However, you live in it. It is a made-up fantasy that you exist in. That is a thing that is completely like, and I think has almost been like passed down to the point of like, we build up these like really strong fantasies and like that are based around our communities, I think, in a way that's very interesting. I think Portland is a big example of that like we refuge in our communities, and these communities become like this ideological refuge from all the other ideologies in the entire world. And that makes us like very, very sheltered from all the other ideologies. And
it reminds me of black student unions at schools. It's in my opinion, that's been something that's never been necessary, and if anything, it does the complete opposite of what schools think they're doing by forming that. Because if you're gathering all of the black students in a school, unless you're in an area where there are very like different leaning black kids, you know what I mean, who are like right wing and shit like that will challenge the input of the other black students, you're not achieving anything at all by putting them all together in one room and talking about problems going on and problems that they face and shit like that.
I feel like the BSU at my school has gotten more shit done than any other student organization, honestly.
In what way?
Like, okay, back when like all the strikes were happening at my school, right, and TAs were getting fired left and right, not a single like student committee stood up for that shit, and the Black Student Union was like, you can't fire all our TAs. Like, where's our quality of education going? You're just fucking your students over. And then when our school was like, you know, sending in like $300,000 worth of police officers every day to silence the protests of their own students, the Black Student Union were the ones that were like, this is exactly like Berkeley. Y'all are just like doing the same shit over and over and over again. And then when they were like, oh yeah, oh, George Floyd, we feel so bad. We as a school, we're putting out a statement. We condemn, you know, racial violence. The BSU was the first one to be like, oh, actually, no, you paid to have your students terrorized and beaten up by police. So they are the only ones outspoken, at least at my school, about shit.
Okay,
so that's got a value.
That has a value, but that's being outspoken is you could do that on your own. You know what I mean? Like you as a Black student could just do that. You don't have to join the Black Student Union, because what I'm getting at is that by being in a Black Student Union, number one, you're creating a group of Black kids in an area where there are obviously other races.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if there are white kids who are racist, who are right-leaning, whatever you want to call it, they're going to look at that group and feel either attacked by that group or like they need to attack that group. So you're already creating that conflict. And we can say that that's not right because obviously it's not right, but it's going to happen. So why do that, number one? Number two, like I was saying, by getting all those Black kids together who more than likely view political things and struggles and shit like that and solutions the exact same way, because they more than likely come from the same background. Because in my experience with Black student unions, it's been myself and kids who have come from shit that I've come from, and we all feel the same way. So then we talk about the problems and solutions and we all think the exact same way, and then we're like, okay, cool, now we know what to do. Now what?
That's a good point.
Now what? Because now we still have to try to begin that fight against the people who actually have power. Mm-hmm. So instead of having a Black student union, there should be a student union of all races, whatever the fuck, and then the Black students within that union do Black student union shit in that union to get it expressed to other people who aren't Black, who don't think the same way as you. It achieves nothing.
Bureaucratically,
they might do things, but it doesn't achieve anything for what that Black student union is supposed to be created for.
And I think to your point exactly, that the idea of them actually isolating themselves into a group like that, coming up with the idea, and then trying to express and change things with their ideas, the fact that they have now been created into a single entity, it's much easier to toss their ideas away or diminutize like what they have to say and stuff like that, because it's not coming from a mass of people, like humans who want to change. It's coming from an individual entity, from, like you said, only one race of people, and it's so it's easier for them to be like, okay, well, that's your say, and then we would need input from everyone. Yeah, and to the same extent, like, you know, isolating anything like a Black History Month or anything like that, it separates it from humanity.
We'll be right back. So sorry.
We'll be right back.
And we are back, everyone.
But yeah, I didn't want to get too far away from myself. But like, yeah, there is that argument that just by isolating that group in any way, shape, or form, like takes away from actual change happening or actual unity.
Okay, so I feel like this brings up a really interesting problem, because say you've got a group of people that's been disenfranchised, whether that be like your queer community, your Black community, your Latinx community, anybody. You know, it benefits you to organize with people who have the same problems as you and who are being disenfranchised like you, but when does that like organization become like a bubble? When does your leadership become suspect? When do your ideas become like, you know, unchallenged? And I like see that shit with like the queer community for sure. Like, and it does get to a concerning degree. Like, you're not allowed to be in this circle of people unless you fit all of these qualifications. And that's just not really reasonable.
And also that if you're
anyone.
challenging any of the qualifications, like that if you're actively like interrogating, not cool.
Yeah.
I think this idea too of forcing people to agree with every single ideology in a group or not being a part of that group has been a very blatantly American thing that has existed for a long, or at least recently,
that's what we're
a
supposed
lot
to be
more
fighting
recently.
against in all of these groups, whether it be a BSU, a queer union, anything like that. We're supposed to be fighting against those norms that have held us down for so long. And then we're doing that exact same thing.
Right. We're creating our own boxes.
And then that's never
For people within our own
acknowledged.
communities, like, which is so weird.
And it's like, absolutely it's necessary to a certain extent, but I think once you get your ideas shopped around enough between the people involved, and then you're still not necessarily refusing, but like not taking the initiative to involve other people outside of that bubble to get their opinions or to at least get your opinion heard by them, then that's when it becomes a bubble and it's not really.
And then it's all of these groups clashing with each other because no one communicated with each other basically. I mean, there is communication. I'm not gonna go out there and say that nobody's communicating, obviously, but like in general, this is what you see when you join these groups, especially. And I think Antifa is a huge example of something that's been built out of radical ideologies and then forcing people to agree with all of them otherwise. And it's dangerous, you know, like Antifa, basically, what they're implying is that if you don't agree with everything if you're not part of their group or agree with what they do,
you're a fascist.
You're a fascist, and it's ridiculous because I was down at the protest and Antifa was one of the few groups that I saw inciting actual violence and burning things and doing stuff like that. Burning the American flag, for example. That it doesn't matter how upset you are with your country, it's your country, and unless you're gonna completely just like revolutionize and overthrow it, like you still have to try and save some semblance. Exactly, you have to save a semblance of what your country represents.
It's just a flag, though.
The Antifa flag.
People put that shit on a shirt, like when that used to be controversial.
I understand what you're saying, but still, like that as a symbol in a crowd of people during a time like this presents radical ideologies one way or another.
It's true.
I mean, really, their flag should just be like what, like a Nazi
it's
symbol.
It's
up
up to people's own discretion on whether or not they're going to take it.
But honestly, it's performative as hell because just burning a flag, it means nothing. You just bought that shit from Walmart. You're burning it in a trash can.
Performative is the perfect word for Antifa.
Nothing, right? And I feel like that's true with like all of the news coverage of this. It's covering the damage of property, like, you know, covering the damage of like the surroundings, not necessarily the people involved or like what they're trying to say.
Or more specifically, the black folks involved. Like the fact that one of the biggest images through this thing was the naked lady in Portland. Like that's not the photo we needed to see, you know, like. The media is really just fucking despicable.
Media is really, and we were talking about this too, is that with how much every day there's a new story, there's a new crazy shit that's happening.
The RNC.
The media. There we go. Media. I was gonna say, but so I'll get into that. Okay. I was like,
I thought you were already doing it, bro. I was like, are you doing this?
Yeah.
It's like we were at the edge of a hill, and we all went down.
Yeah,
and you were
I was like,
that's a big hill.
what the fuck are they doing?
What the fuck are they doing?
Have you guys ever seen Happy Feet? I'm not gonna do it. But basically, I mean, please be aware that it's an election year, so most of the media that you're consuming is
pointed,
so pointed.
Election flavored.
Election flavored, exactly. I love that. We need a design thing that's election flavored.
It's gonna blink.
Yeah, it's gonna be neon and shit. But basically,
neon and shit.
The election flavored episode.
This is anecdotal, but somebody from New Mexico, actually, somebody who went to our high school, recently posted on Facebook. Keep in mind, I deleted Facebook yesterday. I could not.
Really?
So he posted something that was like, no wonder people don't trust the media. He's a Republican. He's a right-leaning.
He's weaning himself off that.
Weaning right. and he said, no wonder the people don't trust the media. And it was like MSNBC posted these two stories in the same day, and it was, despite pandemic, Trump holds rally at RNC or whatever, right? And then the other one was thousands gathered to protest racial inequality, right? And it's like, well, clearly MSNBC is not addressing the same problem in both things.
Right.
And I was like, and I saw it and I was like, you raise a very good point, and I agree with you. It's in the sense of a pandemic, neither of these are good ideas. I will give you that 100%. And that's true. And that's blatantly true. But what it also meant to me was when he said it, like, he was doing it because he cared about people's lives, right? Since clearly he wanted people to be staying home for coronavirus. Which I fear is not the case, because when you ask, okay, you're right, coronavirus is a thing still, we shouldn't be meeting in large groups. What do you have to say about people dying from that hundreds of years of racial injustice and stuff like that, and just marginalizing groups and stuff like that, using certain races for profit, things like this? And those lives, you care about all that, and it's like all of a sudden then their brain switches. It's like, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that's not a problem that exists. It's usually what they go to. So it's not a problem that exists. I think it's really funny you can just deny something, and it's like, okay, well, that's not a problem anymore. But to the point of yeah, exactly. But to the point of the news outlets, especially, like, yeah, they're going crazier than ever. Like, we had suspected it in the last election, people were talking about it, and now it's just out. It's crazy. Like, you could flip from CNN to Fox News, and you could watch yourself and see the kind of things that are saying.
I like actually your wording there, watch yourself, and because it's like when people turn on that shit, it's like they go to look in a mirror, you know, they go to have all their opinions like regurgitated right back at them. So it's like, I like that, like, watch yourself, watch one of those things. Like,
it's the same shit, in my opinion, as like the BS News.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're going to subscribe to whatever news source says the shit that you already
right. It's ingest that news source.
And the only time that you're gonna check those other news sources is for you to pull some shit and be like, what the fuck are they talking about? This is some bullshit. Fuck out of here. It's dumb.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also, this is also one of the things I find very disturbing, is this almost like confusing the fact that you have an opinion for being an intellectual. The fact that you have an opinion at all makes you somehow valid. Like, it makes you somehow inherently right. And I think it's a thing that Dr. Drew talked about this on the podcast last night, Dunning-Kruger, that like people they think they're just masters at stuff without actually having any basis for the fact that, like, so I mean, I see this a lot of people with like WebMD and stuff like that. Like, they don't go see doctors, they're just like, oh, I looked it up on WebMD. and it's like that's wild. Like, you're not an expert. Like, you can't just like look that up and diagnose yourself. But like, this false expertise has like really validated our use of media. Has been like when we go to media now, we're like, oh, well, this is as a result and byproduct of my knowledge and all my, you know, but it's not. It's actually a very passive experience. You only have a couple news outlets to choose from in the first place. Even if you want to get into the Mother Joneses and the fucking, you know, the left magazines and the right magazines, like, even if you want to get into those, they only go further out on the ends of the spectrum instead of like, you know, like trying to coalesce ideas and like.
And people keep forgetting that 90-something% of all the news sources are owned by the same exact company.
Shout out to All Gas No Brakes. All Gas No Brakes, only media I trust. All Gas No Brakes.
Facts.
We did cover them on a...
We did. Although, you know, absolutely. Who knows? You know, we don't know what's going on over there. I think they're good peoples.
But yeah, speaking of the pandemic and stuff like that, I wanted to bring up another topic that I was talking to Brandon about, which is that I was wondering if it was easier for these sports organizations to take a stand with the Black Lives Matter movement due to the fact that there was no crowds in the
There's
stands.
nobody fucking there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, can we follow up on that a bit? Yeah, no, I would really like to, because you were so on point, and yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I do think it's very cute that now niggas are... I think that shit is adorable, bro. The fact that niggas are all of a sudden... Bro, this shit is absurd to me.
That we talked about.
Yeah, the fact that we talked about
they should
that
do this.
the niggas should not be playing and should have from jump had that view of the situation.
That you have that power.
And the fact that it was literally the exact same thing that like sparked this, if that makes any sense. Like the Black Lives Matter movement has already been a thing. The movement for the uplifting of Black lives has always been a thing. But it was George Floyd that sparked this big change. You know what I mean? George Floyd sparked the big change. NBA recognized Black Lives Matter and all that, but niggas were still playing. Then another situation happened, James Blake, and then it's too much. And then it's, we're gonna take a strike. The fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
That's number one, that's so fucking insensitive to George Floyd.
Right.
So his death was not as important as James Blake, or James Blake didn't die, but as James Blake's shooting. What the fuck?
And
Seriously.
every single person before him too.
Right.
Breonna Taylor,
Right.
Elijah McClain.
But it didn't take this long, and it has to do with the comfortability, I think.
It has to do with the comfortability and the fact that niggas are not willing to give up their money.
Facts. And also, but even to that, as soon as that happened, I was like, damn, yeah, we called it, there you go. And then as soon as it happened, of course, hella stories came out about them having to, they were like, oh, what are we gonna do now? The NBA was like, oh shit, what are we gonna do? And this is what they did. They had a conference between the owners, the Players Association, and it was the owners, the coaches, and the players, right? To figure out what they were gonna do next. Michael Jordan acted as the voice of reason during this meeting, being one of the few black team owners.
Right.
They also brought in Barack Obama.
So
We got a minute and a half. Bro.
They brought in Barack Obama.
That's Black Bingo.
The Players Union brought in Barack Obama to ask him for his advice on what to do. Because let's face it, they're basketball players. They are not social scientists.
No.
By any means at all. And of course, somehow they got talked back into playing, and with a few caveats that the NBA is supposed to follow. One of which I caught was Black Lives Matter, say their names, little blip at the end before they go to commercial breaks. That's one of the things, and it has the list of a bunch of people. No, not everyone though, but a bunch of people. And then, yeah, there's supposed to be some other things, like they're going to use all of the arenas as voting centers for the election day, and something else about supporting equal opportunity. It was all a bunch of political, basically, in my opinion, bullshit that, and even somebody, one of the players, I forget who it was, said they were skeptical about the NBA following up on it because chances are it's not going to happen. All they needed was them to go back to playing, and if anything, the strike made the NBA more money than anything.
because there was so much
Because they
reporting on
did it when they wanted it to
and
happen.
they came back so quickly.
They played it as
That's
a
what I was
thing.
gonna say. The fact that those niggas came back in what, 2-3 days?
It was
right?
it was a day and a half. I'm pretty sure they figured this shit out. Yeah, they
Nigga,
played-
what the fuck did that mean?
Yeah.
That is not what I was talking about. Sorry, sir.
It's all good. I'm sure we will have plenty more to talk about next week. The NBA, DNC, and RNC are all the same thing. We will catch you next week. We love you guys.
You the same.
Thank you so much, Layla. We will catch you guys next time.
Thank you.
Ducky Jones.